Data protection and privacy teams are under more pressure than ever with new laws, AI oversight, data breaches, and the constant expectation to do more with fewer resources.
That's why TrustArc built a modern privacy and data protection management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. It unifies your tools, automates the work that slows you down, and surfaces what matters most right when you need it.
From guided quick actions to our intelligent assistant, Ask Arc, you get credible, contextual answers backed by expert research, not generic AI guesses.
Finally, privacy that works the way privacy pros work.
Learn how TrustArc helps teams move faster with confidence at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.
You're listening to Serious Privacy, powered by TrustArc. Here are your hosts, Paul Breitbart, Ralph O'Brien, and Dr. Kay Royal.
By the time you hear this episode, it will likely be New Year's Eve or just in the new year. So from all of us at Serious Privacy, we already wish you an amazing 2026. Because yes, you hear it right, this is the final episode of the year. And traditionally, we look back at the year that was. What has happened with the US state legislation? Is it still the bubbling mess that it has been in recent years? But also, what is the final news of the year? And what are our favorite episodes to look back on? My name is Paul Breitbart.
My name is Ralph O'Brien.
And I'm Kay Royal, and welcome to Serious Privacy. So the unexpected question isn't as unexpected as we might imagine this week, guys, because the question I'm going to ask you is, what was your favorite episode this year? Let's see if they stare at me blankly or if they had one ready.
No, I've got one ready. My favorite time of the year is always when the three of us can get together. So I would say the highlight for me would be Picasso, and the highlight for me would be the Privacy Space episode where we got to record in person with a live studio audience.
Oh, that was nice. Yes.
Yeah, that was a great episode. And an especially fun week, indeed. Seeing all of you again and catching up, having dinner, having drinks was a really good week. I actually have 3 favorite episodes this year, Kay, and you're going to hate me for that because you asked for one.
I'm going to hate you for it.
I can't choose. And yeah, I think the one is the Indigenous Privacy episode that we recorded at IAPP, because I thought that was very special just for the topic that not a lot of people generally talk about and that deserves more attention. The Gaza episode, probably the most difficult one that we've ever recorded.
Agreed.
Also where we got a lot of positive feedback from people. That was a special one this year. And especially also this time of year, I'm also reminded about our mental health episode and talking about being too busy. I think these weeks that applies for almost everybody because obviously the world ends on January 1st. So everything needs to be done this side of Christmas. And then come January 1st, so by the time the people listen to this podcast, it shows that the world actually hasn't ended, or at least from what we predict now, mid-December, the world would not have ended. And we actually have more time to wrap things up. So the mental health episode also is a dear one to me this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think you stole it from me for the week on Indigenous privacy.
Yep.
Because that is one that I really enjoyed. And we invited a couple of guys to present to my privacy class on Indigenous privacy. It was nothing like our podcast. Nothing. And our podcast was just spot on. So I like it. So I will pick you one there and say it was also recorded at IAPP, but it was the 30-year plan. For some reason, that one just really stands out to me as one that we had fun on. Not that we don't usually have fun on the podcast, but that one really stands out. But then, of course, this year we also had the 250 episodes, right? We hit 250 episodes this year and published. That one was on July 11th that it was published. Yeah, it was really hard for me to go through all of them and look at which ones meant the most, because they were all such solid episodes, and whether they were packed full of information or advice or predictions or, oh, wait, y'all, we need a prediction. Wasn't that a wonderful segue?
A prediction for 2026.
Yeah. What is your top prediction for 2026? And if you're feeling froggy, feel free to think of what do you think is going to be really good and what do you think is going to be really bad. But if you just have one, that's fine.
So I have a prediction of one thing that I don't think will happen. And I don't think that we'll see the digital AI omnibus adopted in time to push back the application date of the EU AI Act. I know we've hardly talked about the digital AI omnibus. There is the digital omnibus that we talked about at Privacy Space, but there is also a digital AI omnibus making some changes and allegedly giving some clarifications to the EU AI Act. And one of the things in that law is that it allows to push back the application date for all the provisions of high-risk AI. That application date is the 2nd of August, 2026. And even though they can have a separate vote in the Parliament and in the Council on those dates, I'm just not sure that they are going to make it in time and reach agreement that is a good idea, because it will lead to all kinds of additional uncertainty, like we saw with the pushback of CCPA. What does this mean in practice? And we'll also see something similar that would happen here. What does it mean? What does it mean for companies that are already working on implementing this? Will they then suddenly stop at the last minute? What is the final deadline to push back a date like that for an important law to apply? I just don't believe that this is something that we will see happen.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There seems to be a global trend at the moment towards deregulation. There's this idea of, let's bring out the digital omnibus and amend the GDPR. We've seen it here in the UK with the Digital Use and Access Act, which is, again, there'll be huge changes here because we'll see the Information Commissioner's Office become the Information Commission. We'll see all of the exemptions and nuances that the Digital Use and Access Act brings to changing our GDPR, our Data Protection Act and PECAS. We are going to be diverging further from the EU regime. Deregulation strikes me as dangerous in that we're building faster and faster cars, but at the same time, legally, we seem to be asking for reduced braking systems. Right? We're building faster and better technology, but at the same time...
no more seatbelts.
Yeah, we're taking away the seatbelts, right? This is, to me, it's a fundamental concern about the way the world is turning. Something I think probably won't happen, or certainly I'm concerned will be held up for a long time, is EU chat control, of course. Whether the European finally get together and decide they're going to open everybody's emails just in case you're doing something naughty. I think that would involve a huge amount of false positives. Yeah, I think that one should hopefully be caught up for a long time to come. And I guess I should then punt it over the pond to Her Majesty Kay Royal to talk about where she sees the US going over the next year.
Oh, it's not really the US that I limited my predictions and thoughts to, definitely. And I've thought about this a lot because I've had the question come to me from several external sources as well. So I would say I'm going to have to roll AI into my prediction because it is the ubiquitous thing on top of everyone's mind, right? What I would like to say is that companies will do the right things when it comes to AI, but they will also partner across their suppliers and their clients to not be too overly controlling with AI. And before y'all fuss at me, AI is a very useful tool, but if you are restricted from using any of the data that you process in AI, then you can't use the ability of the tool to simplify processes if you can't put it over data. So that's what AI does. It does millions and millions of calculations in a millisecond that takes away the human power required to do it. But companies are like, you can't use AI on our data. How do you expect us to cut our prices then? And by the way, when I say our, the general hour, the royal hour, not my employer hour, but I'm seeing it across so many different people and talking to friends and professional colleagues around the world. This is the biggest thing they're wrestling with AI. 1, the business wants to implement it. 2, the shadow AI. And 3, the fact that even when they do approve it and they put the controls in place, their clients are not allowing them to use the data.
I would not allow a company to use company data, my company's data, to train a public AI model.
That's why I say put the controls over it.
Yeah. If it's a model that would only be, if it's fine-tuning the way our enterprise AI would work, that's fine. But using my employee data, my customer data to train a public AI model, never going to happen.
I absolutely agree with you. That's why I say putting the controls over it is key. I'm not saying y'all privacy people and data protection should go out and get wild with AI. I'm just saying that it is a tool. And like email, like online searches, like the internet, like fax machines, it is revolutionizing the way that we work. And I do believe there is a strong trend to be overprotective when the right controls are in place. The right controls have to be in place, people. Don't send glitter bombs to my door. I promise. I'm talking about the right controls in place.
Yeah. Glitter bombs are still fine.
Do not go crazy with glitter bombs. But there are controls to be put in place, like an enterprise model, like de-identifying data. There's a lot of controls that can be put in place that facilitate the innovative use of AI responsibly without hurting people, without causing more risk, without going hog wild on glitter bombs. That is my prediction. That's what I'd like my prediction to be, is that we would get there. But my prediction is going to be we're not going to solve it.
While you are on the topic of AI, which, by the way, is the word we've used most on this podcast this year, according to our recording software, we'll put out the reel on our social media. But while we're on the topic of AI, I have another more positive prediction, and that is the breakthrough of open source AI models. The Dutch government, the French have already worked on a few of these. There is an NL LLM, so based on licensed materials from Dutch newspapers and publishers, but also source information, again, licensed from the Dutch government and Dutch universities. The French Mistral has an open source model that is publicly available now. And I think there will be more next year. And that apart from relying on big tech, on US big tech or Chinese big tech, we will actually also be able to use open source models. And I think that is also where Europe will be able to make the difference when it comes to large language models, in providing them open source instead of based on scraped data and behind a paywall.
I also want to add one more prediction, just because we're talking about them. We're going to continue to get some interesting court judgments. I just refer back to the CJEU this year, things like Rust Media, EDPS versus SRB, Bindel versus the European Commission, the Dun Bradstreet Austria case. These things come out and mean that we then argue and talk about them. And some of them was even fundamentally, what is personal data? And the first time we saw personal data being defined was in the Council of Europe, September 1980. So the fact we're still arguing about it in 2025, I think that argument will continue in the courts 2026 and beyond. Something Paul was saying earlier about the mental health episode, seeing as you're probably going to be listening to this after Christmas, I also just want to take the opportunity before we go into the roundup of the US states, just to make sure that wish everyone and make sure that everybody has had a restful break with their families and loved ones and enjoyed the holidays to the best. And we all come out fighting again in 2026. And for those people who are going through a bad or a tough time, we feel you. The data protection profession for me as a family, and I managed to host last night a drink session in London, which was nothing more than people commiserating each other for a very tough year and finding solace. Other people care about this. So we care, you care, and I hope you have a very restful break.
And on that note, we'll move over to the US for a state overview.
We've been promising this to y'all this year, and it's so interesting because there were 0 state laws passed this year that were omnibus privacy laws.
Okay, that's it.
That's it. We're done. We're finished. But no, just know that all the laws are in effect. There are now 20 omnibus privacy laws here in the U.S. This is not counting other laws that touch privacy, like biometric laws, the children development laws that we saw passed in Vermont and California, the medical information laws, the AI laws, all these other laws that touch into data and touch into what we do. But for omnibus privacy laws, we had 20 of them in effect. Yes, I count Florida, even though there's a high threshold and most people say you can't really count Florida. They passed an omnibus law. It's not our fault. You have to mainly be a global tech company to be subject to it. it's still there. So just so y'all know, there is a fabulous report that just came out by the Future of Privacy Forum. It is, let me see, what day did it come out? It says December. I don't have the date of when it actually came out. We'll make sure to give you the link to this report, and some of the information that we get will actually come out of this report. And so is there a way that we're going to have another state law by the end of this year? Please. If I say absolutely no way in Hades on fire is it going to happen, someone will pass something over Christmas and have an emergency session or something. Not likely to happen. Let's leave it at that one. Let's also look at some of the trends that we're seeing across the state laws. And this isn't going to be new because every year we've done a roundup of state omnibus privacy laws. And what's the difference between them? Mainly, you're looking at whether or not they define children as under 13, or do they define them as COPPA defines them? So if COPPA goes up and calls a child under 15, then the states that define it according to COPPA will automatically go up. The others will remain under 13 and won't. There are slight differences in sensitive data, but they all pretty much include what you would imagine they would include, right? It's medical data, financial data, biometrics data, things, targeted geolocation or precise geolocation, things like that are your sensitive data. Where are we differing? We're mainly differing in the definition of selling data. So out of this list of states, 7 of them define selling data as for money, which means this also isn't including the data broker laws, of which we know California is really ramping up for their data broker mafia that they're launching to go after data brokers. But that also doesn't include that law. But selling in 7 of these states means for money, but in the remaining states, it's the expansive definition of selling data for money or for something of value. So keep in mind that you still have those, and if you need a breakdown of what those states are, give me just a second. Let me pull that up for you. So under the definition of expansive, we have California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Oregon, Texas, Montana, Delaware, Nebraska, New Hampshire, and Tennessee, Minnesota, and Maryland. So those are the ones that have the expansive definition. So if you give data away in exchange for something, then that would be considered a sale of data. And all of the ones that include that, you have to have a provision for them to opt out of the sale of data. So where else are we seeing major differences? We're seeing differences in enforcement. There are some states that are very active, and there are some states who are not. I'll give Paul and Ralph 3 guesses of what states are very active in enforcement.
California, Texas, New York.
That's a good one, Ralph. Any guesses? I don't have any data to back this up.
I'd go through California and Texas as well. A third one would be harder for me because New York has struggled to pass its legislation. So I'd have to go for someone Virginia. There you go.
Okay, I could see that. I'm going to say, to be frank, I don't see a lot of other enforcement out across most of the states. And like I said, I haven't pulled stats to see what they are. California and Texas, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you want to get into activity on the privacy front, you might look at Washington, although we don't have an omnibus law in Washington. We do have the Washington My Data, My Health, My Data, My Something law, My Health, My Data.
My health, my data.
My captain?
Yeah, my captain. Oh, data, my data. Anyway, they're being active in enforcement activity, but they don't have an omnibus law. So we wouldn't roll them under there. Illinois actually is very active in enforcement because for a long time, Illinois was the only one that had the biometrics. So the BIPA. We do have other states that have biometric acts now. But more importantly, what does this mean for us? So we're seeing class actions come out of California. Apparently, we're also seeing class actions coming out of Arizona, New York, and there was one other in New England that I was looking at. Might be Delaware. I'd have to look again. But they're starting to do Georgia is one of them. They're starting to do these class actions based on old laws. namely wiretapping laws. So merely the fact that you have a non-required tracker on your website, and required means you have to have that cookie, that piece of technology for the website to work, such as you're on a shopping site and you put something in your shopping cart and then you go look at another department or another item. You don't want to lose the items in your shopping cart, right? It's required to be there for the website to work. A lot of people are still rolling functional and even advertising under required because as far as they're concerned, it's required to be there because they want the data. You can't do that, people. So in these states, in the United States, what do you do if you don't want to be hit with a class action lawsuit that is centered around you having cookies and trackers on your website? We've seen this around the Meta Pixel. We've seen it around the YouTube trackers, different things like this. LinkedIn is a popular one as well, where if you have that tracker on your website and you do not have a zero load for cookies for anything other than required, which nobody in the U.S. requires that on a privacy perspective, but does that then subject you to the Wiretap Act? It should not. The Wiretap Act was specifically designed for government wiretapping citizens. And it talks about recording communications and conversations. There's two separate parts. That's what I also wanted to mention. One of my favorite episodes was the one with Wayne Unger on constitutional law. Love to have his perspective on this as well. It doesn't apply. You're not recording conversation. Are you sending information back without that person? Yes. But if you have a cookie banner that pops up and they opt out of it, then you're not getting their information back, right? There's no data transmitted. It's not a zero load for dropping the cookie, but it is a zero load for transferring the data back to the owner of that cookie or whoever. So I do find that this is a little bit of a headache. As much of a headache as having 20 state omnibus privacy laws around with everything else in the U.S. Yes, we're 30 years behind Europe. Europe did this 30 years ago, and they've gotten away from it. Now we're starting to do it. This is utterly ridiculous. How do people complain?
I think the same is now happening with artificial intelligence. And you mentioned there have no laws been adopted on data protection or privacy in 2025 at state level. If we look at artificial intelligence, and I'm getting this data from Stanford's Artificial Intelligence Index, until the end of 2024, 131 AI-related bills were passed into law in the respective US states. This year alone, in 2025, and that is coming from the Software Improvement Group, 38 states have adopted or enacted around 100 measures. So it's almost doubled this year, the volume of AI rules, AI laws in the United States. And then early December, the White House came up with another executive order saying, no more state legislation on AI. Everything is now going to be federal, and we will determine what the rules are without actually determining what the rules are.
Yeah.
That was the point I was going to mention, the Trump executive order that basically says every state has got to stop passing AI legislation because we want to do it at a federal level. And yet, as you say, Paul, no federal rules are forthcoming.
Yeah. Also because Congress doesn't agree. Congress has made very explicit by shooting down the amendment on the moratorium for state-level AI legislation for the foreseeable future, that this is not something that the federal government should do.
Yeah, he's passing an executive order to bypass Congress. And executive orders were never intended for that purpose. It's not clear whether or not it can be used for that purpose, but regardless of whether it can or can't, he's doing it. Yeah, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here?
The Supreme Court will be busy.
Supreme Court will be very busy.
Supreme Court will be busy.
The other thing to mention is because we're going to release this on roughly the 31st of December time, the 1st of January is also dropped the Californian delete request and opt-out platforms. So if you do happen to be in California, I think this is almost a revolutionary service by a regulator to actually have a platform where they will facilitate the delete and opt-out requests and forward them on to companies who would be expected to comply with the request directly from the regulator, even though it comes from the individual. So I think that would be one to watch.
It will be. And I'm not surprised that we saw that come out of California. Tom Kemp is now the director of the privacy agency there. Not surprised to see more technology-driven activities come out of that whatsoever. We loved having him on the podcast back before he was the director. We should probably ask him if he wants to come back. So we'll see. This just says that I hate it now when people see something happen, whether it's an enforcement action, it's a law in a new country, it's something weird that happens with data. They're like, job security. Okay. I'm like, I don't need more job security. We have plenty of job security right now.
Yes.
But does that mean that the world can't stand to improve? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. We still need a lot more protections out there. We wish we could trust companies to do the right thing when it comes to personal data without having a law and enforcement activity that tells them they have to do it.
No, that's true. It's going to be a messy year, I think, also from the US perspective, but we'll see whether this will be challenged or not. Maybe while we are reflecting and looking back on the last couple of weeks, there is some more small news in privacy that we should share. For one, the procedural GDPR is now in effect.
Yes.
So that is something to look out for. I guess it mainly concerns the data protection authorities and how they should streamline their ways of working. But still, it's an important milestone to take a look at. I also understand that EDPB has started discussions on their position on the omnibus, so that should probably come out somewhere in the first quarter of next year to see what they will do. But the one thing that I really wanted to highlight is a shout out to the Irish Data Protection Commission. And Ralph, you were actually the one sharing this with me and Kay. The Irish DPC has put online an awareness campaign on posting images of your children on social media. And Kay, if you recall, that was one of the very first topics we discussed on this podcast back in season 1, probably episode 4 or 5.
I think it was season 1, yeah.
Yeah, it was sharenting, exactly. Parents sharing information, oversharing information of their children online. It's a very powerful ad, and we'll share it in the show notes as well. But this is something you really should watch and probably also take the message to heart.
Yeah. It's a kid and their parents going through a shopping centre, and I think all the strangers in the shopping centre comment on the child's activities. It's pretty powerful because they've obviously read it on social media. One that I would add on to here in terms of news, we haven't really had ample chance to talk about the Australian social media ban for under 16s, which probably deserves an entire episode in itself. And I think it'd be good to talk about that with perspective from that age group as well.
Yes.
And here in the UK, we've also had another large penalty from the ICO on an organisation called LastPass. Where LastPass is a password manager application for people to store all their passwords in a vault. Well, they compromised the personal information of 1.6 million of its UK users, and as a result have had a 1.2 million Great British Pound penalty put upon them by the Information Commissioner's Office. So again, a penalty from the UK Information Commissioner that focuses on information security. Quite often see from the ICO, even though I'm fairly critical of the ICO for some of its enforcement strategies, large security breaches that do go public, they're the things that do tend to attract the ICO's penalty. So 1.2 million, perhaps not to be sniffed at.
Perhaps not. And I think with that, it brings us to the end of the year. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. If you're someone that's thoroughly looking forward to it, then I wish you all the best. If you're someone that is missing a loved one or having a hard time through this holidays, we send you our love. And Happy New Year.
Both Kay and I have lost someone special to us this year. That really hit home. Yeah, just message from me is just be kind to each other and be kind to yourself.
Absolutely. We'll be back on Data Protection Day 2026, the 28th of January, with the first episode of Season 7. Thank you so much for listening this year, for all your kind words, and you'll hear us next year.
That was Serious Privacy.
This wraps up our podcast for this week. Please do share the episode with your friends and colleagues because we love to get more listeners. and join the conversation on LinkedIn or on Blue Sky, you'll find us under Serious Privacy on both platforms. You'll find Kay as Heart of Privacy, Ralph as IGR O'Brien, and myself as Europol B. Until next week, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye, y'all.
If you're a data protection or privacy professional, you already know the pressure. Non-stop regulatory change, AI oversight, internal demands, and the expectation to somehow stay ahead of it all. And the old patchwork of tools just isn't cutting it anymore.
No, that's why TrustArc created a modern privacy management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. The TrustArc platform brings your workflows, evidence, research, tasks, and applications all together in one unified and intelligent workspace so you don't waste time digging, clicking, or context switching.
With Ask Arc, your privacy assistant, you can ask plain language questions about laws, jurisdictions, or even your own program data and get credible, cited answers based on Nimity research and more than 1,000 global laws. It's explainable, transparent, and purpose-built for data protection and privacy.
So if you need to add a vendor, create a cookie banner, or start an assessment, quick actions take formally complex tasks, turn them into bite-sized guided workflows to save you time.
It's a platform that thinks like you, works like you, and helps you move faster with confidence, whether you're a seasoned DPO or you're just getting started.
See how modern privacy gets done. Explore Arc at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.